Good morning. We'd like to welcome you to another edition of the Sunday School Review. This week's lesson is entitled Song of Moses and is taken from Deuteronomy, the 32nd chapter, verses 3 through 6, verses 10 through 14, and verse 18. Now, the book of Deuteronomy means the second law, or the restatement, or the law restated. And this restatement of the law is to the second generation. Now, the first generation had died in the wilderness because of lack of faith. And this new generation is on the verge of going into the promised land. And Moses, this is just the last days of Moses' tenure, the last days of the wilderness wandering. Remember, the children of Israel wandered in the wilderness for 40 years. So Moses' 40-year reign is about to come to an end, and his successor, who is Joshua, has been named. Joshua was chosen as Moses' successor to cross over the Jordan and take the children of Israel into the promised land. Now, when I said the first generation had all died in the wilderness, except two, that is Joshua and Caleb, were the only two of the nation of Israel that was over the age of 20 that made it into the promised land. Even Moses himself, Moses got to see the promised land, but he did not get to physically enter into the promised land. So Joshua and Caleb was two of the 12 spies that were sent out to spy out the land of Canaan, to see if it was a good land. And the majority, that is 10, came back and said, yes, it is a good land, but we can't take it. So Joshua and Caleb, the two, they said, let's go up now, because God had already said, he had already promised them the land. So Joshua and Caleb had the faith to go up and take the land, but obviously the majority ruled. The group went with the 10 spies that gave the evil report versus the 2 spies that gave the good report. So as Moses' 40-year tenure is about to end, and as I said, Joshua has been appointed to take over the leadership. Deuteronomy is like a set of speeches that Moses is giving to the new generation. He's encouraging them to renew the covenant with God. That is the covenant that was given at Sinai, to renew the covenant. This is for the new generation that came through the wilderness. Now, as I said, this new generation was under the age of 20. So they actually witnessed the mighty acts of God. Okay, whereas everyone over the age of 20, except the 2, that is Joshua and Caleb, died in the wilderness for lack of faith. That was the reason for their death in the wilderness, because of lack of faith. And Moses is giving this set of speeches to remind the people to remember who God is and what he has done for them. Okay, he said, remember who God is and what God has done for them. So it's calling them to remember. And actually in Deuteronomy 31st chapter, God instructs Moses to teach the people this song so that when difficult times come, they can look back and remember God's faithfulness, God's trustworthy, and God's justice. Okay, so that's the reason that the Lord instructed Moses to teach them this song for the purpose that they can remember when they get into the land and things are going well and they start looking at the other nations, and they will have a tendency to forget. And even though Moses taught them this song for them to remember, they still forsook God, rejected God, and they went into apostasy. Okay, the reason that Moses wanted them to remember what God has done, who God is and what he's done, so they do not repeat the same mistakes that their ancestors did and suffer for it. Whereas we know they did, okay, but there was no excuse, okay? There was no reason for them to repeat the same mistakes, however they did, okay? We know the history, they did, okay? And God was still faithful and just, and he showed them mercy, just like he shows us mercy. Okay, when we have forsaken God or turn our backs on him, he still shows us mercy. Okay, just like he did for the children of Israel. Now, there are two outlines, actually three outlines. The first outline is God's faithfulness. So God is faithful, God's faithfulness. This is Deuteronomy, the 32nd chapter, verses 3 through 6. And then our second outline is Deuteronomy, the 32nd chapter, verses 10 through 14. And it's God's goodness. Okay, God's goodness, God's amazing grace. Okay, and the third outline is the people apostasy. That is, the people was ungrateful, they rejected God, and they fell into apostasy. Okay, and this is what Moses was instructing them to do. When they grow comfortable and careless, don't, in other words, once you get into the land of Canaan, the land that flows with milk and honey, don't get too comfortable and careless and reject God and go after the gods of the Canaanites, which they did. Okay, they did. God predicted that they would run into difficulty, they would turn their back on him and they would slip into apostasy, okay, or in a black slidden type condition. Okay, let's go back and read our first outline, God's faithfulness. And that's verses 32nd chapter, verses 3 to 6. Verse 3, because I will publish the name of the Lord, ascribe ye greatness unto our God. Now, as the lesson title is Song of Moses, this is a song, okay, that the Lord instructed Moses to teach to the people so that they would remember, okay. It's like a lot of times And especially when they do commercials, they always call it a jingle. They always do a song. Why do they do a song? So you can remember. It's easy to remember a jingle or a song. So the Lord instructed Moses to teach them this in a song so they can remember, okay? So it starts with verse 3, our lesson does. Because I will publish the name of the Lord, ascribe ye greatness unto his name. So God is great and greatly to be praised, okay? Verse 4, he is the rock. His work is perfect, for all his ways are judgment or just, okay? A God of truth and without iniquity, just and right is he. Okay, so verse 3 says, ascribe ye greatness of our God. God is a great God, and he is greatly to be praised. And verse 4 says, he is the rock. Now in the Old Testament, that's one characteristic they ascribe to God. A rock symbolizes stability and strength. Now, God does not change. Now, you may remember some of your high school friends, you meet them 20 years later or so, they've changed. But God does not change. He's the same today, yesterday, and forever. God does not change. Some people, well, I changed my mind. No, God doesn't change. Okay, so he is the rock, stability and strength. Okay, now at verse 4, B, he is perfect. His work is perfect, for all his ways are judgment. In other words, just. The Lord is just. And we're going to see this displayed in our lesson today, how even though the people forgot God, but God still showed them grace and mercy, just like he still shows us grace and mercy. A God of truth and without iniquity, just and right is he. Okay, now this is describing the attributes of God. Okay, now the next set of scriptures I'm going to read, starting at 5, in other words, 5 and 6, are going to describe the attributes of the people. So, in other words, everything God is, the people, Israel, is just the opposite. Okay, God is a rock. He's represents strength, stability. He does not change. He's just. Okay, he's trustworthy. Whereas what we're going to describe here is just as the opposite of what God is. And it says the subheading is despite a crooked generation. In other words, the generation is crooked. They're the opposite. Verse 5 said, they have corrupted themselves. This is talking about Israel, the nation. They have corrupted themselves. Their spot is not the spot of the children. They are a perverse and crooked generation, just the opposite of God. Okay, verse 6, do ye thus request the Lord, O foolish people and unwise? Is not he thy father that had brought thee, and that had he not made thee and establish thee. In other words, this is talking about the generation, this generation, this second generation. Okay. So he said, basically, this generation that we are talking about today, that Deuteronomy describes, the second generation, that is the law, a restatement of the law to the second generation. That's what Deuteronomy means. Restatement of the law that was given at Sinai. Okay, so it's verse 6 says, "Oh, foolish people and unwise." Now, this generation had no excuse for rejecting God after they had seen, because as I said, this is the generation of those individuals that were 20 years and under 20. The rest of them, except two, Joshua and Caleb, died in the wilderness. So this generation had witnessed through the wilderness experience, through that 40-year wilderness experience, had witnessed the mighty acts of God. So there was no excuse. Well, yeah, we just heard about it, but they were eyewitnesses to these mighty acts of God. So how, as verse 6 said, how foolish or unwise? You saw it firsthand. You witnessed the mighty acts of God, how he brought them through this wandering experience and into the promised land. Okay, well, as we said, they're already in the promised land. After they crossed over the Jordan, a river, that is Joshua took them over to Jordan, they was into the promised land, a land flowing with milk and honey. Okay, a good land. So you're gonna turn your back on the one who brought you over, okay, for in exchange for the false Canaanite gods? You're gonna do that? How foolish and unwise. And you witness what happened to your ancestors for their unfaithfulness? You witnessed this? It's not that, well, I heard that our ancestors died in the wilderness because of unbelief. I heard that. No, I witnessed that. And I witnessed the mighty acts of God. I witnessed God's faithfulness. I witnessed his trustworthiness. I witnessed that. So you have to be foolish and unwise when you was an eyewitness and you still reject God. Okay, after you get into the promised land, you get comfortable and you get careless and you go after the false gods of the nation. Okay, that's the first outline. Let's go to the second outline. God's goodness. Okay, remember, God is faithful, trustworthy, and just. God's goodness. Verses 10 through 12. He found him in a desert land, and in a waste, howling wilderness. He led him about. He instructed him. Okay, this is the protection that God provided for his people. Okay, verse 11. As an eagle stirs her nest, flourishes over her young, spreadeth abroad her wings, taketh them, bears them on her wings. Verse 12. So the Lord alone did lead him, and there was no strange God with him. Verse 13. He made him ride on the high places of the earth, that he might eat of the increase of the field. And he made him to suck honey out of the rock, and oil out of the fiery rock. Okay, verse 14. Butter of kine, the milk of the sheep, the fat of the lamb, the ram breed of Bashan, and goats with the fat of kidneys of wheat, and thou didst drink the pure blood of the grapes. Okay, so for these are the things that God has done for them. Okay, how the Lord led them through the wilderness. So they had no reason to betray God. So in other words, after all that God had done for them, after all that God done for them, how could they be so ungrateful? Okay. This is so the next outline shows us for all of the things that God has done for them. This is, so in other words, this is how you repay me for the things that I've done for you. It's just like a parent and a child. The parent said, well, I did all these things for you, everything I did for you. And this is how you repay me, which we're going to get to see. They repay God by turning their back on him. That doesn't make sense. And this and 13 and 14 describes what I've done for you. Basically, as I said earlier, he brought them into a good land, a land flowing with milk and honey. And this is the very reason that Moses is instructed to teach them this song, so they don't forget, okay? They remember who God is and what I've done. And this is how they repay the Lord, by turning their back on him, by slipping into apostasy. And this is the third outline, and is verse 18. It's called people apostasy. In other words, their act of repaying God for his gratefulness. So as I said earlier, everything that God is, the people are just the opposite, okay? The people, whereas God is faithful, the people are unfaithful, ungrateful. Whereas God is trustworthy, the people are untrustworthy, okay? For everything God is, the people are not. And this is the result, apostasy. Verse 18, out of the rock they beget thee, thou art unmindful, and has forgotten God that formed thee. In other words, instead of being grateful for what God has done, the people reject God. Okay, the people are rebellious. Okay, God in the song instructed Moses, yes, this is what will happen. They will be ungrateful. They will be rebellious, but I will remain just. I will be just toward them. I will be faithful. I'm not going to change. I'm going to be unchangeable. I'm not going to become untrustworthy. I'm going to remain trustworthy. So, and this is our a point for us today. This is what this lesson here challenged us to do as believers, to do, is to worship and praise God for his grace. And as a result of God's grace and mercy, okay, it was God's grace and mercy that protected, they continued to protect the nation. Even though, as you say, they wasn't deserving of it. And that's, it's unmerited. Grace and mercy is an unmerited and undeserved and unearned favor. It's not, well, I earned this grace, I earned this mercy. No, you didn't. It was undeserving. But because of God's faithfulness and his justice of being a just God, you received it. Okay, this is what we can learn from Israel apostasy or Israel's backslidden condition. Even though they were the total opposite of what God is faithful. He is grace. God's grace is what brings us through, not our earning it, God's grace, God's unmerited favor that he showers on us, causes us to be counted worthy. And that's our lesson today, the Song of Moses, where he's instructed to teach the people. Basically, Moses recited the history through a series of speeches. He recited the history of the nation of Israel and causing them to remember who God is and what he has done, so we can not forget to worship and praise him for the mighty acts of God. And as our lesson today, we'd like to thank you for watching. We ask you to join us next week for another edition of the Sunday School Review. Thank you.